The last human weapon left the pale meridian without ceremony. 4 magnetic cranes lifted the spinal accelerator from the cruiser's open hull, while Council inspectors watched from behind a transparent pressure wall. The weapon was longer than most Council patrol ships. Its black support frame emerged first, then the cooling vanes, then the segmented accelerator tube that had run almost the entire length of the vessel. No alarm sounded. No human officer protested. No hidden compartment opened. Commodore Maeve Calder stood beside the dismantling cradle with her hands behind her back and watched 8 years of her ship's design rise into the white glare of the anchorage. Prefect Audrin Silac found her lack of emotion reassuring. He had spent 2 years arguing that humanity's fleet had become the greatest destabilizing force in the Sable Reach. Every human cruiser carried enough firepower to frighten 3 neighboring governments. Every destroyer exercised as though an invasion might begin before breakfast. Human formations regularly discharged weapons into empty space during readiness drills that the Council regarded as unnecessarily theatrical. Now the Council had finally acted. The Sable Reach disarmament mandate required humanity to remove offensive systems from every capital vessel operating within Council-administered frontier territory. Humanity had objected exactly once. Then it had obeyed. Completely. Audrin had expected legal resistance, threats, delays. Some human interpretation of the mandate clever enough to obey every word while defeating its meaning. Instead, human shipyards had begun cutting weapons out of their own hulls within 48 hours. Maeve signed the final inspection slate. The Council examiner turned it toward Audrin. Offensive capacity confirmed removed. Audrin looked through the pressure wall. Beyond it, the pale meridian floated in the dismantling cradle like a predatory animal after its teeth had been pulled. Open sections of hull showed pale structural ribs where launch cells had once been. The main accelerator channel had become an empty black trench running down the ship's spine. "Then it is finished," Audrin said. Maeve glanced at him. "No," she said. "The disarmament is finished." There was enough difference in the statement to make him look back. "You still believe the Reach will become less stable?" "I believe the Reach will become quieter." "That is the point." Maeve gave him a tired look. "You keep using those as though they mean the same thing." Audrin had heard variations of this warning before. Human admirals had insisted that their frontier exercises served purposes beyond readiness. Human navigation officers had submitted reports about unexplained deep range migration patterns. Human scientists had requested exemptions for what they called territorial signaling operations. The Council had reviewed everything. No conventional military justification existed for firing weapons into unoccupied interstellar space. To Audrin, the explanation had always been obvious. Humans had grown accustomed to being armed. Now they were frightened of learning how to live without it. "We have discussed this," he said. "Yes." "And the Council found insufficient evidence." "Yes." "You agreed to comply." Maeve looked through the glass again. "We did." Audrin waited for more. Nothing came. That bothered him more than another argument would have. Across the chamber, a small figure touched 2 fingers to the silver device around his throat. Isharkem had come to the dismantling anchorage because the Mordani Cultural Archive had requested an observer. He had no military authority. He had no engineering title. He was, according to the identification band around his wrist, a keeper of migratory memory. Audrin had privately thought the designation absurd. The Mordani still maintained entire institutes devoted to preserving songs, root myths, settlement chants, and pre-space flight oral records. Their historians could recite the order in which ancient nomadic families had crossed continents thousands of years earlier. Useful to anthropologists, perhaps. Not fleet policy. Yet Ishar had spent the entire removal procedure staring not at the weapon, but at the deck beneath his feet. His throat device emitted a faint vibration. Maeve noticed. Pressure collar. Ishar nodded. Human machinery is difficult for Mordani bone cavities. Your low-frequency systems create resonance. Sorry. No need, the collar compensates. He touched it again. Then his expression changed. Maeve saw it immediately. What? Ishar frowned. It stopped. Adrian looked between them. What stopped? The compensation. That seems like an improvement. Ishar did not answer. The great accelerator outside cleared the pale meridian. The dismantling cradle rotated it toward a waiting transport. For decades, the Sable reach had possessed a background vibration almost too low for humans to detect. Human weapons tests, drive exercises, coil discharges, readiness pulses. The Mordani felt them in the jaw, in the sternum, behind the eyes. Ishar had complained about them every time he visited a human installation. Now the last of them was gone. His collar fell completely still. He should have been relieved. Instead, a memory surfaced from childhood. Not words at first. A rhythm. His grandmother's fingers tapping against the floor, while she recited one of the oldest migration verses. When the hunters cease to call across the night, do not celebrate the silence. Ishar turned slowly toward the observation windows. Outside them lay Sable Reach. Stars, dust, blackness, and for the first time since humanity had established its frontier patrols, nothing else. 19 days later, the first deep-range sensor station reported that something in the dark had changed direction. The signal arrived at the Council's regional chamber as a low-priority navigation anomaly. Adrian almost did not read it. The report came from a civilian astronomical array beyond the Mordani colony of Namur. A group of massive deep space bodies, previously moving parallel to settled space, had altered course. That alone meant little. The Sable Reach contained rogue planets, ice fields, uncharted debris, and countless objects that had never been classified. Then a second array confirmed the movement. Then a third. Adrian enlarged the projection. Hundreds of pale points drifted across the map. None matched known ship profiles. None emitted propulsion signatures. They were simply moving. Slowly. Directly toward inhabited systems. How large? Adrian asked. The analyst beside him hesitated. We do not have a reliable maximum. Minimum. Another hesitation. The smallest confirmed body is approximately 4 kilometers. Adrian stared at him. And the largest? We cannot determine where it ends. That was when Ishar Kem requested permission to enter the chamber. Adrian nearly refused. Then he saw what Ishar was carrying. A sheet of transparent polymer. On it was an ancient Mordani star map. Not an electronic reconstruction. A physical copy. Lines had been drawn across it in blue. Lines that matched the incoming migration. Ishar placed the map over the modern projection. The room went silent. They have come before, he said. The council named them Pale Choir because no one knew what else to call them. Through telescopes, they looked almost artificial. Long, translucent bodies moved between the stars with no visible engines, their surfaces folded into enormous layered fins. Some traveled alone. Others moved in clusters so large that instruments struggled to distinguish one organism from another. They produced Low-frequency gravitational distortions. Not strong enough to damage planets. Strong enough for Ishar's pressure collar to begin working continuously. The first confirmed image made Audrey stop speaking halfway through a sentence. The largest visible creature crossed the sensor field slowly. Its body kept crossing after the operators expected it to end. Then kept crossing. Then kept crossing. Finally, the image dissolved into static. "They are biological?" Audrey asked. Maeve Calder stood across the chamber from him. The Commodore no longer wore Fleet Command insignia. Under the Council mandate, the Pale Meridian was classified as a defensive transport. "No one knows what word fits," she said. "Biological is close." "You have encountered them." "Indirectly." "You neglected to inform us." Maeve looked at him for several seconds. "We sent you 27 reports." Audrey's jaw tightened. Those reports described migration anomalies. Yes. They did not describe creatures several kilometers long. We had never gotten this close to one. Because Maeve did not answer immediately. Ishar did. Because they stayed away. Everyone looked toward him. The Mordani keeper stood beside a projection of his people's oldest surviving migration route. "Our oldest settlements were not placed where water was best," he said. "For centuries historians could not explain why." He indicated broad, empty regions on the map. "Our ancestors abandoned entire fertile valleys. They built settlements beside volcanic ridges. They carried drums through winter migrations even when food was scarce." Audrey stared at the map. "What does that have to do with this?" "We believe the stories were symbolic." Ishar activated an audio reconstruction. A deep repeating pulse filled the chamber. Several delegates flinched. Ishar's collar reacted instantly. "That rhythm appears in Mordani records more than 3,000 years old," he said. "It was called the Hunter's Claim." Maeve stepped closer. The pulse repeated. Her eyes narrowed. "Again." Ishar replayed it. Maeve turned toward one of her officers. "Overlay Frontier Pattern 3. The human officer hesitated only a second. A second waveform appeared. It was nearly identical. Not perfectly, but close enough that no one needed an explanation. Audrey felt the chamber grow colder. "What is Frontier Pattern 3? Maeve answered without looking at him. "A live fire readiness pattern." "For what tactical purpose?" "Originally, none." Audrey stared. Maeve enlarged the waveform. 22 years ago, a human survey group noticed unidentified deep-range contacts consistently shifting away after heavy fleet exercises. We assumed coincidence. She touched another control. More records appeared. Then it happened again. Another. Then again. Dozens of migration tracks filled the display. Each approached. Each curved away after a major human firing exercise. Audrey looked toward the pale cluster, now moving toward Namur. "You knew?" "No," Maeve said sharply. "We suspected." "You built policy around a suspicion." "We tested patterns. We altered firing intervals. We changed directions. Every time the signature weakened, distant contacts moved closer. Every time we restored it, they moved away." "Then why did your reports not say this clearly?" "They did." Maeve brought up the original council response. The classification stamp appeared in red. Insufficient causal evidence. Possible military retention bias. No one spoke. Audrey remembered approving that phrase. He had believed it accurate. A navigation alert interrupted the chamber. The nearest Pale Choir group had adjusted course again. Toward Namur. Ishar's homeworld. Audrey looked at Maeve. How quickly can your weapons be restored? Maeve's expression did not change. They can't. The answer seemed impossible. What do you mean they can't? I mean you ordered us to remove them. I understand what the mandate said. So did we. You must have retained emergency systems. Point defense only, too small. Reserve accelerators. Dismantled. Stored magazines. Decommissioned or transferred outside the mandate zone. Audrin stared at her. No strategic reserve. Maeve's eyes hardened. You spent 2 years accusing us of preparing to evade disarmament. Then you wrote inspections specifically designed to ensure we couldn't. The words landed harder because she did not raise her voice. You won, she said. The chamber was silent. You got exactly what you asked for. The proof came from a dead-range platform. Station 12 had once been a human weapons testing site on the edge of the Reach. Its accelerator had already been dismantled, but its old power conditioning lattice remained. When the approaching Pale Choir distorted local gravity, a damaged storage bank dumped its charge into the abandoned range coils. Nothing launched. No projectile existed to launch. But for 3 seconds, the array produced the same pressure pattern that had accompanied human fleet exercises for decades. Every Pale Choir organism within detection range reacted. Not violently. Not fearfully. They turned. All of them. The movement was so synchronized that the Council analysts initially assumed a sensor error. A cluster spanning thousands of kilometers changed orientation away from Station 12. Then the residual field faded. The Pale Choir stopped turning. Slowly, they resumed their original course, toward inhabited space. Audrin watched the recording 4 times. On the 5th, he finally understood. They are not attacking us. No, Ishar said. They are moving into empty territory. Maeve nodded. Territory they believe became empty 19 days ago. Audrin closed his eyes. 19 days. The last spinal accelerator had been removed 19 days before the first course change. The quiet had not created peace. The quiet had been heard. The emergency council session lasted 3 hours before someone asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Can humanity recreate the signal? Maeve Calder stood at the center of the chamber. 73 human ships remained operational across the inner Sable Reach. All 73 had complied with the disarmament mandate. Several council delegates had spent the first hour assuming that fact would eventually become untrue. They kept asking questions designed to reveal the secret arsenal they were certain humans must possess. Had any weapons been retained for research? No. Could mining accelerators be adapted? Not in time. Could shipyards rebuild spinal guns? Not before the Pale Choir reached Namur. Did Earth maintain an undeclared military depot? Maeve finally lost patience. There is no hidden fleet. Nobody answered. There are no secret guns. Still silence. You ordered us to disarm because you believed we would never willingly do it. We obeyed because remaining inside the council mattered more than proving you wrong. Audrin felt something unpleasant tighten in his chest. Maeve looked directly at him. We trusted that if the consequences appeared, you would at least remember we warned you. He could not defend himself. So he asked the only question that mattered. What can 73 ships do? Maeve turned toward the tactical projection. Possibly enough. The human plan initially sounded absurd. The original deterrent signature had been produced by weapons, accelerator coils, launch fields, recoil compensation, directed energy dumping. But the Pale Choir did not understand weapons. It understood pressure, territorial presence, the enormous low-frequency disturbances of something powerful enough to claim a region of space. Human engineers believed drive systems could imitate the same broad pattern. Not perfectly, not safely, and not for long. Maeve projected a huge arc across the Sable reach. 73 human ships distributed over millions of kilometers. Each would push its propulsion field far outside normal operating limits. Not to accelerate, to resonate. Every vessel would become one note in an artificial territorial call. Audrin studied the engineering estimates. These drive loads exceed manufacturer limits. Yes. By how much? Enough that the manufacturers would prefer we stop discussing it. Several delegates shifted uneasily. And the likely damage. Field coils will degrade. How many ships? All of them. Audrin looked up. Destroyed. No. Maeve paused. Probably. That single word quieted the room. Some will retain partial propulsion. Some may lose drive capability entirely. We won't know until we try. The representative from Namur spoke next. There are 400 million people on our world. Maeve nodded. I know. Then do it. Audrin turned toward him. The Mordani representative's face was rigid. Do it now. Maeve did not move. No. The chamber erupted. Audrin raised his voice. Commodore, we need the Council's formal acknowledgement first. Audrin almost laughed from disbelief. You want authorization? No. Maeve's expression remained calm. I want understanding. The room gradually quieted. You ordered us to disarm because you believed the existence of weapons proved intent. If we save Namur and you learn nothing, we will be back here in 10 years having the same argument about something else. Audrin felt every eye in the chamber shift toward him. Maeve continued. We are not asking permission to restore our weapons. We are not asking you to repeal the mandate today. We are asking you to acknowledge one fact. Which fact? That capability can have a purpose you do not recognize. Audrin looked at the pale choir migration. Then at the 73 unarmed human ships. Then at Ishtar. The Mordani keeper stood with one hand pressed against his collar. His people had remembered this danger as myth. Humans had rediscovered it as data. The Council had dismissed both because neither fit the Council's definition of military necessity. Audrin opened the authorization channel. This is Prefect Audrin Silik. His voice sounded smaller than he expected. Council record, emergency session. He paused. The human frontier fleet warned that disarmament could alter conditions in the Sable reach. Another pause. The Council judged those warnings incorrectly. Nobody moved. Audrin forced himself to continue. The resulting danger is ours to acknowledge. Maeve watched him. Is that enough? No, Audrin said. He looked toward the human formation. It is. Then he stepped away from the Council dais. I'm going with you. From the observation deck of the Pale Meridian, the pale choir looked like a second night sky moving through the first. Audrin had expected monsters. The word had seemed appropriate. What he saw was worse because it was beautiful. Great translucent bodies drifted through the dark, pale internal structures glowing beneath layered skin. Some were narrow and miles long. Others unfolded vast fins that caught starlight and turned it into dim silver sheets. There was no anger in their approach. No formation. No weapons. They simply came. Namur waited behind the human fleet. 400 million lives beneath clouds and oceans. unaware that an ancient migration had mistaken their system for newly vacant feeding territory. Audrin stood beside Ishar. The Mordani keeper had insisted on coming. His pressure collar was vibrating so strongly now that Audrin could feel it through the deck. "You should be in medical," Audrin said. Ishar almost smiled. "My ancestors wrote songs about this pressure. I would be embarrassed to miss it." Across the bridge, Maeve sat in the command chair of a cruiser without a spinal gun. The empty channel where the accelerator had once run was visible through structural telemetry. A gap. Audrin could not stop looking at it. 73 human ships waited across the tactical display. Cruisers, destroyers, old patrol vessels, support hulls. Every one disarmed. Every one exactly as the Council had demanded. "Formation status," Maeve asked. "Arc 1 locked. Arc 2 locked. Outer ships reporting stable position. Choir range. Closing." Maeve nodded. "Begin low field." The first human drives activated. Audrin felt nothing. Then Ishar gripped the railing. His collar hummed. A second group of ships joined. Then a third. The deck seemed to develop a pulse beneath Audrin's boots. Not sound. Something deeper. Pressure traveled through the hull. Across the tactical display, 73 individual propulsion fields began overlapping. Maeve watched the waveform. Still too weak. Outer arc can increase 12%. Do it. The pressure intensified. Ishar closed his eyes. Audrin looked toward the pale choir. "No change." "They don't hear us," he said. Maeve did not look away from her instruments. "They hear us." "Then why aren't they turning?" "Because we sound small." The pale meridian shuddered. A warning appeared. Field coil temperature exceeding normal limit. Audrin saw it. Maeve saw him see it. Normal limit stopped mattering about 3 minutes ago. Commodore, Arc 4 reporting instability. Hold geometry. Drive damage increasing. Hold. One human ship vanished from the formation display. Audrin's breath caught. Destroyed. Drive shut down, an officer answered, hull intact. Maeve did not react. Tow assignment later, keep its position marked. Another warning. Then another. 2 more ships lost field strength. The artificial territorial call weakened. The pale choir continued forward. Ishar opened his eyes. "No." Maeve turned toward him. "What?" "It is wrong." Audrin stared. Ishar pressed both hands against his collar. "The rhythm." Maeve's face tightened. "We're matching the historical pattern." "No." Ishar stepped toward the central display. "The record is not a rhythm. It is literally a waveform. That is how you measured it." His voice sharpened. "My people did not preserve measurements." Maeve understood before Audrin did. "A song." Ishar nodded. "Call and answer." He pointed toward different sections of the waveform. "You are making one enormous voice." He touched another section. The old migration chants alternate. Maeve stared at the human formation. Audrin saw the realization move across her face. Predators answering each other across territory. "Yes." Maeve hit the command channel. "All ships pattern change." Her officers looked up. "Commodore." Split arc into 2 response groups. Odd identifiers lead. Even identifiers answer. Current drives are already unstable. "I know." Changing phase under load could burn half the fleet. "I know." Audrin stepped forward. "Maeve." She turned. For the first time since he had met her, she looked angry. Not at him. At the situation. At time. At the impossible distance between knowledge and survival. You wanted to know why we kept firing into empty space. Audrey said nothing. Maeve pointed through the viewport. There was never anything empty about it. Then she turned back. Execute split pattern. The pale meridian lurched. Every light on the bridge dimmed. Across millions of kilometers, 37 human ships overloaded their drives together. The pressure struck Audrey's bones. Ishar's collar screamed. Then the first group fell silent. For half a second there was nothing. 36 ships answered. The sensation changed completely. Audrey could not have described it later. One group called across the dark. The other replied. Not words. Not threats. Presence. Something enormous seemed to emerge between the ships, an invisible creature made of overlapping fields and deliberate pressure. A hunter too large to see. A territory already occupied. The nearest pale choir organism slowed. Movement change, someone shouted. Maeve gripped the arms of her chair. Continue. The first group called again. Several human ships reported coil failures. A destroyer lost its main drive. Another dropped to emergency power. Still the response came. Call. Answer. Call. Answer. The pale choir began to turn. Not all at once. One enormous pale body rolled away from Namur. Then another. A cluster behind it changed course. Across the bridge, people began breathing again. Keep it going, Maeve said. Audrey looked at the drive temperatures. They are already turning. Not enough. You'll lose the pale meridian. If we break early, the trailing migration may resume approach. You don't know that. Maeve looked at him. No. The word cut straight through him. No. They did not know. Just as they had not known with perfect certainty 22 years earlier. They had seen patterns. They had tested. They had warned. And when certainty remained impossible, they had still made a decision because frontier survival rarely waited for perfect proof. Audrey had demanded certainty from humanity because the cost of allowing human weapons frightened him. He had never demanded equal certainty from his own assumption that removing those weapons was safe. That was the mistake, not the mandate itself. Not fear, not even distrust. The mistake had been believing that what the Council failed to understand could therefore have no purpose. Another ship dropped from the formation. Then another. The arc began developing gaps. Commodore, the operations officer said, we're losing geometry. Maeve studied the display. Move us forward. Her bridge went silent. The pale meridian occupied the central anchor position. Moving forward would place the ship closer to the migration and increase the field load required to maintain the artificial territorial shape. Commodore, her helmsman said carefully, our main coils are already at failure threshold. I know. If we advance. I know. Audrey stepped beside her chair. This is because of my order. Maeve did not look at him. No. Yes. No. Her eyes remained on the pale choir. This is because 400 million people are behind us. The answer hurt more than blame. Audrey had imagined humans arrogant because they kept their ships armed. He had imagined their warnings as an attempt to preserve privilege. Now the same humans were burning out the engines of the fleet they had genuinely allowed him to disarm. Not to prove him wrong. Not to punish the Council. To protect people who had voted against them. Advance, Maeve ordered. The pale meridian moved. The pressure became unbearable. Ishar's collar reached maximum output and shut itself down. He gasped and dropped to one knee. Adrian caught him. "I'm fine," Ishar managed. "You are clearly not." Ishar looked through the viewport. "Listen." Adrian almost told him there was nothing to hear. Then he realized what Ishar meant. The pale choir had turned. All of it. Across the tactical projection, the migration bent away from Namur in a widening silver arc. The nearest organism passed across the stars. Then another. Then another. The artificial human call continued. 30 ships. 29. 27. More drives failed. The pattern weakened. But the pale choir kept moving away. "Commodore," the sensor officer whispered, "trailing bodies are following the turn." Maeve stared at the data. "How many?" All observed groups. No one cheered. "Not yet." "Confirm." "Confirmed." Maeve waited. 5 seconds. 10. Again. "Confirmed. Migration vector is away from inhabited systems." Only then did Maeve close her eyes. End pattern. One by one, the surviving human ships silenced their drives. The great invisible hunter vanished. For a terrifying moment, nothing filled the dark. Then the pale choir continued away anyway. Adrian watched the pale shapes retreat. Behind him, damage reports began arriving. The number was worse than he expected. 14 human ships retained normal propulsion. 21 had limited drives. The rest required tow assistance or major reconstruction. The pale meridian had lost both primary field coils. It would not move under its own power again for months. Adrian looked through the viewport at the black trench where the cruiser's gun had once been. For the first time, he understood the difference between a ship that had been defeated and a ship that had given something up willingly. 3 days later, the Council sent towing vessels. The pale meridian was attached to 2 of them. Around her drifted dozens of other human ships, silent and unarmed, their damaged drives dark. Adrian remained aboard. He had been offered immediate transport back to the regional capital. He declined. There would be hearings, votes, investigations. There would be arguments about whether humanity should be permitted to restore some frontier weapons, whether alternative deterrent arrays could recreate the pressure pattern, whether Mordani historical records should be incorporated into modern migration models. Those arguments could wait. Ishar stood beside him at the viewport. His silver pressure collar rested on the ledge. Unused. Adrian noticed. "You should wear it." "No need." The tow ships still produce vibration. "Yes." "Then why?" Ishar raised one hand. Adrian stopped. For several seconds they stood quietly. The hull carried faint mechanical tremors from the towing cables. Nothing more. No deep pressure from the pale choir. No field resonance. No ancient migration approaching through the dark. Ishar smiled. "For the first time," he said, "the silence means what you thought it meant." Adrian looked outside. The human fleet stretched across space in a broken line. No weapons. Many without functioning drives. Every vessel carrying scars from a battle in which not one shot had been fired. Far behind them, at the edge of sensor range, the final pale shapes disappeared into the darkness. Adrian thought of the dismantling anchorage, the accelerator rising from the pale meridian, Maeve signing the inspection, his own certainty when the chamber examiner had announced that humanity's offensive capacity was gone. Then it is finished. He understood now why Maeve had corrected him. The Council had ordered humanity to disarm. Humanity had obeyed. Perfectly. And when the darkness noticed, humanity had protected the Council anyway. Adrian watched the silent ships being towed home. Beside him, Ishar's pressure collar remained still. This time the silence was safe.